next speaker, Nathan Scholl, who has 22 years of experience in archaeology and cultural resource management. Nathan is for the past 15 years, has been working as a geoarchaeologist and is a longtime friend and volunteer with NHAS and New Hampshire Scrap. Nathan volunteered at Livermore State Park, Hillsbury State Park, Bear Brook State Park, and Malajuak State Park. So we very much appreciate his expertise and his willingness to volunteer and pitch in. And so please join me in welcoming Nathan Scholl.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you up north to what's become one of my favorite places in the state of New Hampshire and Maine, Umbagog Lake. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the investigations I did there with Graham Pape for the relicensing of the Arrow Dam. So if you're not familiar with the Umbagog Lake, it's pretty far up north in the southernmost of the Rangeley Lakes. There we go. There's Umbagog there. Relatively small lake, but it's got its charms. A few quick facts. The lake is approximately 7,850 acres with 95 miles of shoreline. The lake is the headwaters of the Androscoggin River and the outlet of the McGalloway River, which is basically in the same place. Let's see which one. Okay. So Androscoggin comes in right up here, the McGalloway comes down, or the Androscoggin comes out here, the McGalloway comes down here. Looking at the name Umbagog, which is kind of interesting because it's the only of the Rangeley Lakes that still kind of keeps its original Abenaki name. Masta's Abenaki's Indian Legends, Grammar, and Place Names from 1932 gives its name to be to the Clearwater Lake. Day's 1994 Western Abenaki Dictionary has it as Clear Lake. But I prefer Joseph Laurette's New Familiar Abenaki in English Dialogues 1884 definition of Clear Lake or Shallow Lake. And more on this to come, why I have this preference. The current elevation of the lake waters is controlled by the Arrow Dam, which was first constructed in 1852. Subsequent dams at Arrow further raised lake water levels. There is no known, or none to me at least, a pre-dam map of the lake. The lake shoreline is owned by basically three different entities. It's predominantly contained within the Umbagog National Wildlife Refuge, which is green on this map. However, a not insignificant part of the shoreline is also part of the Umbagog Lake State Park under New Hampshire state ownership, and that would be the kind of tan areas of the shoreline. And then also there is a smaller portion under private ownership. As part of the state park, there are 33 remote primitive campsites and 4 cabins in isolated locations around the lake, only accessible by boat. They're very neat if you like camping. They all look like great places to go to camp. Interestingly, nearly all known pre-contact sites are associated with campsites, either the primitive or more modern camps. However, not all of these sites, these modern campsites or the primitive ones, have been investigated for sites. So always leads me to wonder, people like to camp where they like to camp in the past. Maybe some of these areas would be good to look in the future. And again, on the map, the little triangles are all the different campsites that you can rent through the state park. So being a geoarchaeologist, I like to start, I like to lay my bedrock with the geologic history, some quick geologic history of the lake area based on a regional understanding of the ice ages, looking at soils maps, and also work that the Maine Geological Survey did in 1975. It's clear that this landscape is predominantly shaped and controlled by the glaciers that came through and retreated. Unsurprisingly, the vast majority of the lakeshore is comprised of glacial deposits, perhaps somewhat thin, as there are a lot of bedrock exposures around the lake and the lakeshore at the shoreline and above. The map here, it shows different geologic formations at the surface. Of course, only on the Maine side, as the political boundary between the states goes right through kind of the middle of the state. So they didn't jump over and do New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has not made it to this part of the state yet. The lake itself likely originated as a glacial meltwater feature. Other meltwater features, such as the canes shown in the green triangles to the southeast, and a small but nice looking esker on the northeast, also support this theory. Significant areas around the lake that are low and flat and today are composed of wetland soils likely can be taken as evidence of a larger lake in the past than even today with the artificial level of the lake. Other late Pleistocene or early Holocene features and direct association of the lake are this nice paleo channel that runs to the west of the lake, likely an old segment of the Megalloway. And if I was going to go look for sites that date to that date range, I would look there. All right, so prior to the dam, what did the lake look like? The present appearance of Umbagog Lake differs significantly from its pre-1950s natural form. Construction of a dam at the headwaters of the Androscoggin River in the mid-19th century created an impoundment behind the dam that also extended into the lake or lakes. Historical descriptions suggest the lake may have been as much as 6.1 meters lower prior to the construction of the dams. Other estimates provide a lower range, with construction of the dam raising the lake levels from 1.2 to 2.7 meters. Modern bathymetry of the lake indicates that lowering the depth of the water by a medium of 3 meters would produce 3 smaller lakes. Early descriptions of the lake area seem to support this theory, as the lake was described as smaller bodies of water surrounded by extensive wetlands or lake plain meadows. And a lot of the wetlands in the northwest part up here still have names that end with meadow. These smaller lakes were likely connected by small drainages, and 3 shallow lakes would seemingly fit well with an Abenaki name indicating shallow lake waters. So that's where my preference for the name meaning tends to lean. Mid-20th century aerial photos show evidence of the smaller lake size, as drowned river channels can still be observed at that time. So here is an aerial photo from the 50s, and here's the Androscoggin River coming in. The lake is at this level, but you can still see its old channel going way out into the middle of the lake. That would be about where that's located. The Androscoggin River once flowed an additional mile as the crow flies, not counting all its meanders, past its current headwater. Down to the south, the dead Cambridge River also flowed an additional 1.5 miles past its current outlet at the village of Upton to the west, near to the village of Cambridge, as this mid-20th century photo also shows. So again, you can see the channel coming way out into the lake. And then we also have some early historical mapping of Upton showing the cove west of the village is not completely flooded at the time of this map, containing a wetland area and additional meadows or meanders of the Dead Cambridge River channel before reaching the open water of the Umbagog Lake. Early tourism accounts from the mid 1800s indicate that the hotel at Upton Village was reached by following a river, the river a mile upstream from Cambridge, where today that hotel's location is lakeside. So again, here we have the river going much further than it does today. This also will explain why the river is called the Dead Cambridge River, where today it does not touch the township of Cambridge and not the Dead Upton River. Prior to the construction of the dam, the lake was described historically as bordered in many places by natural meadows where the farmers cut large quantities of coarse hay. The ground was quite dry and firm except for early spring when it was flooded for a few weeks. The forest trees growing at the high water and for some distance back, wherever this land was low and flat, were chiefly white pines. Most of those near the water were cut and rafted off by lumbermen between 1840 and 1858. So this is kind of what I would imagine it would look like pre-dam if you were standing at the high water mark looking out at the lake. Currently, the lakeshore predominantly looks like this, with a high water right up against the bank side, with little to no land below the high water level. At limited periods of low water and some of the ancient shoreline can still be seen. So in this picture, you can see the ancient shoreline here and the modern shoreline behind it. And yeah, I'd like to introduce you to someone interesting if you haven't heard of him before, William Brewster. Over a 40-year period between 1871 and 1907, ornithologist William Brewster visited the Umbagog Lake region and took many photos of the landscape, of the lake landscape. One noticeable difference between the present lakeshore and the late 1800s can be seen in Brewster's photos: the amount of shoreline present below the tree line. Well, lots more than today. Amazing photos he took. Overall, the shoreline between the water and the tree line is wider than seen during modern visits. Sandy shorelines are obvious in several photos and grassy margins as well. In 1951, Howard Sargent described finding most of the sites he identified as located at positions on the lake shoreline that were sandy beaches, but few such areas could be described today. Brewster's photos are interesting because they do appear to confirm that sandy shorelines were once more prevalent than seen today. Turning to and here's how he spent his time at the lake. He built himself a little boathouse and sailed around. It's very interesting. Again, yeah, turning to what previous investigations have been done around the lake. Howard Sargent for the Peabody Museum investigated sites around the lakeshore, identifying 6 pre-contact Native American sites. Gramley and Rutledge for National Geographic in 1979 to 1982 reinvestigated the Malls Rock site that Sargent had identified. Northeast Archaeological Research Center did some investigations for shoreline development in 2013 and 2019 and identified 1 pre-contact site in Maine. And then between 2019 and 2022, Ray and Pape for the Arrow Dam relicense identified 8 additional sites, 3 in New Hampshire and 6 in Maine. So altogether, there are 9 pre-contact and 7 post-contact sites currently identified. So those are the pre-contacts and those are the post-contacts. So today I just wanted to talk about a little sample of 4 of these sites, if we can get through them. We will look at the Malls Rock site, the Daytona Beach site, Howard Dutton's camp or Harry Dutton's camp, and the Sunday Landing. All right, starting at Malls Rock. It's a well-known physical landmark on the western shoreline of Umbagog Lake, a large bedrock outcrop that rises 2 to 3 meters above the shoreline, and it's prominent enough to make it onto USGS maps. There's even a datum there. The site was known since the early Euro-American settlers arrived at the Umbagog Lake region as a site still utilized by Native American groups in the 19th century as a camp. So that's what the site looks like. The actual bedrock part of the site looks like at high water, and that's what it looks like at lower water. So pretty impressive. The Malls Rock landform would have stood out as a large bedrock outcrop, either on the pre-dam lakeshore or within 100 meters of the pre-dam lakeshore. In all likelihood, it was close enough to the pre-dam lakeshore that it was easily reached by a watercraft entering or exiting the Androscoggin River, making it both convenient to water travel and easily identifiable as a landmark on the local landscape. Closer to the end of the glacial period, lake levels may have been low enough have been high enough that the rock was in a similar position relative to the lakeshore as it is today. So it might have looked more like that. And then just prior to the damming, it might have looked more like this. So what has been found there? Again, it was originally investigated by Howard Sargent in 1951, and then later reinvestigated by Gramley and Rutledge in 1979. Results of these investigations indicated that the Malls Rock site is a multi-component site repeatedly occupied over a 9,000-year span between the early Archaic period and continuing through into the post-contact historical period. Early Archaic artifacts from the site include 3 bifurcate base points. The middle and late Archaic periods are represented by diagnostic Neville, Otter Creek, Brewerton, and small stem point forms. No clear diagnostic early woodland period components were identified at the site, suggesting a possible lapse in occupation during that time period. The middle woodland is represented by a Jack's Reef, Porter Notch Point, and Rocker Dente stamped ceramic shards. Incised ceramics reminiscent of Iroquoian forms indicate the site was also occupied during the late woodland period. Fragments of European ballast flint and kaolin pipes also suggest use during the contact period. Other materials recovered from Malls Rock include atlatl weights, gouges, grooved axes, bifaces, scrapers, drills, hammerstones, and an ulu, among thousands of pieces of debitage. Over 600 pieces of calcined bone were recovered in one 4x4 meter excavation by Gramley and Rutledge, and were analyzed by ArcSpecies, indicating a likely moose beaver dependency seen elsewhere in inland archaic sites. Both sets of investigators were not favorably impressed with the archaeological potential for this site. Historical records remember the site as an occupation for remnant local tribal populations in the mid-18th to 19th centuries. Notable historic figures such as Metalek or Metallic and Molly Ockett have been associated with the site. Archaeologically, gun flints, lead shot, clay pipe fragments, and other artifacts found during the 1979 excavations appear to confirm occupations from this general period. The site continued to be used as a camp by early Euro-American populations, even in the late 19th century, as shown here in one of Brewster's photos. The site was used as a logging camp in the early 20th century, but the camp was taken over by John Fabisek and occupied by him until approximately 1951, around which time his cabin burned. So, well, Fabisek was in residency, he maintained a garden out there, out of which he collected artifacts, excavating sometimes to a depth of 35 centimeters below surface. He collected all the artifacts he found, but only kept the best, stockpiling flakes by a specific boulder and other places around the site, and often throwing broken or otherwise unpleasant tools, including all quartz tools, apparently, into the lake. He allowed Sargent to excavate a 50-foot trench through the garden area of the site, but was not able to be on site at the time to guide excavations. So this is Gramley's and Rutledge's map of the site that they did, and here we'll make it a little bigger. Change our aspect. So this is the bedrock feature. The lake obviously is north that way, and then this would be Sargent's Trench, and then Gramley and Rutledge's different excavations around the site. Oh, and this is the boulder which they found the discards from the resident. Sargent notes that most of the artifacts were found in the upper 40 centimeters of the site, but some artifacts were found at depths of 60 centimeters associated with a fire pit. He also found that native pottery was only in the upper areas of the soil column of the site. He notes that there were multiple spoil piles at that Fabersac discards, and which they went through and found things such as drills, points, scrapers, and at least one cell. Luckily, Fabersac donated his collection to Sargent upon his death, which at the time of Gramley's article was at Franklin Pierce. Gramley and Rutledge on a National Geographic Society grant, looking for Paleo-Indian stuff, I believe, reinvestigated the site in 1979 to 1980. They excavated 13 square meters across the site. Generally, they found basically intact cultural stratigraphy with ceramic period artifacts overlying archaic artifacts and thin midden deposits. Evidence of the discard piles were still present at the time of this investigation, with over 3,000 artifacts in one pile alone. So again, I'm not quite sure why they didn't like this site, besides they weren't finding Paleo-Indian stuff there. So as part of the later investigations that drove the surveys we did in 2019, a shoreline and surface survey was completed around the site area, and the site was found to be actively being used as one of the state park's remote campsites. At this time, the lake water level was high, and artifacts were found eroding from the banks of the shore and in the water below. Artifacts were also found at the site surface. Additionally, this survey extended the boundaries of the site, which has never been officially determined in modern methodological sense. An additional site locus was found 15 meters north of the traditional site area. Here too, artifacts were found eroding from the site surface, and here too, there's a state park campsite. In 2021, phase 1 testing of the site was done within the APE of the Errol Dam impoundment to better delineate the north to south boundary of the site. Testing found that the site stretches approximately 150 meters along the shoreline and is located across 2 lake terraces. Artifacts were recovered from both shovel testing and from pedestrian surveys of the lake shore, since the lake levels were very low at the time of this investigation. These included additional lithic debitage, tools, pottery, calcine bone, and at least one feature. So this is the site as we defined it after our investigation. Here is the actual bedrock feature, Miles Rock. This brown line indicates the terrace that was previously investigated. Our shovel tests in green are both historic and pre-contact artifacts, and the red are just pre-contact alone. This is what that part of the site looks like. There's the campsite area. And this is kind of behind it, nice and flat and open. The new area we identified is just to the north, a slightly smaller terrace. There's a similar bedrock ledge right here, not as impressive as Mall's Rock, but similar where you could kind of boat right up to it. And that's what that area looks like with the bedrock outcropping. Let's see, and then this is just a selection of what we found during our investigations. A wide array of lithic materials, including quartz, Mount Jasper and Jefferson rhyolites, chalcedony, Onondaga chert, and the Sungan chert were noted. And not great on this slide, but we did have some pottery as well. So of the roughly 137, from the excavations we did, we were collecting something roughly around 137 artifacts per meter excavated. And then at least 43 of the artifacts we found in this collection came from the eroding shoreline, including one small stem point. And there's some of the calcine bone that was found. We did not have it within our investigation parameters to identify them further. And then this is at the northern loci of the site, a large boulder right on the shoreline, which has a little grinding surface right on it. So kind of in summary, it seems like the site was often used due to its proximity on the landscape, or prominence on the landscape, and its proximity to the head of the Androscoggin River. In the early Holocene, the site may have been directly lakeside as it is today, but by the later Holocene period, with the shoreline slightly different, the site may have existed at the edge of a grassy lake plain. While dismissed in the past due to historic or modern period disturbances, the site today appears to hold the possibility of historical significance. Occupations at the site span 9,000 years or more, nearly continuous from the early Archaic to the historic period, including post-contact period native occupations, some of which may be connected to historical figures. Disturbances at the site may be significant in places, but in other portions of the site appear intact. Even with this supposed disturbance, previous investigators still note the intact cultural stratification. Further investigation, of course, is needed to better determine the site's significance. In the meanwhile, it would be good to see if someone was able to, which wouldn't be me, unfortunately, but I did recommend the possibility of halting the recreational activities at the site until it can be better investigated. All right, moving to a different site down the shoreline, the Daytona Beach site. Going back to 1951, Sergeant took the morning off the excavations from Mall's Rock to go to Daytona Beach. There they found 2 flakes of chipped pebble, and a scraper and a flaked knife on the beach at the waterline. The site was relocated in 2019, again by finding debitage in the water below the high water line on a submerged sandy beach. Returning to the site in 2021, a phase 1 survey found additional artifacts on the now exposed beach. So everything we looked at, when we found it before, the water was right up the high water line, but now you can see there is something of a beach exposed. Shovel testing on the very sandy landform behind the beach found a very small assemblage of lithic artifacts. Interestingly, these artifacts were predominantly located deeper in the sand deposits, 45 to 55 centimeters below surface, then would be seen in an occupation occurring at the geomorphologically stable modern day ground surface, which is usually depositing within the top 30 centimeters. And by stable, we mean where the landform is no longer being built or otherwise modified by natural geological forces. And for this glacial landscape, that is about the time when that all ends, when the glaciers retreat. And that's one of the shovel tests, and so we were getting artifacts down in this level. Very few, but it's still they were there. The low lake water levels during the 2021 investigation allowed for geomorphological observations of the area around the site. So this is what it looked like when we came back, much more exposure. This is an ancient lake shoreline here. Power of the ice, this boulder, you can just barely see it. There's a track in front of it. That's how far that boulder was pushed by ice. So neat stuff. And this is what it looked like in 2021 again, where you can barely faintly see it, but here's that shoreline, and then sandy materials in front of it. Little island down here, and this is our site area. So looking at this geomorphologically, again, ancient shoreline, beach in front of it, stretching up here, which is kind of what we're showing, demarcated here. The island would have just been a prominence on the shoreline, and possibly a wetland area just behind the shore at that time. The site itself appears to be something like a dune-like formation. While the age of the dune deposit and the artifacts found buried within them is unknown, the deeply buried artifacts appear to represent occupations while the dune was still forming. Regionally, most dunes formed shortly after the retreat of the glacial lakes and the warming that occurred after it. If this dune relates to that period of regional dune growth, then these deposits could represent a late Pleistocene or early Holocene site occupation, potentially relating to Paleo-Indian or early archaic pre-contact Native American cultural periods. As with many archaeological sites, further investigation would be needed to answer those questions. Turning to the post-contact period now to talk about the phenomenon of steamboats in the local history. Steamboats began operation on the lake in the early 1960s and ran through the early 20th century when they last ran on Umbagog is currently unknown. These boats were primarily used to support the recreational tourism industry, but secondarily provide transportation and delivery services such as the postal mail to the local communities. They also supported the lumber industry by hauling logs. And you can see on this photo or this drawing, maybe transferring one person, but also transporting a cat. So not just for tourists, unless the cow was on vacation, I'm not sure. And here's a early 20th century from one of the steamers hauling logs on the lake. And so around the lake, there were 3 stops or landings, one at Upton Village, one at Sunday Cove on the northeast side of the lake, and one at Arrow Dam. There were also 3 more landings up the Galloway River. So we kind of wanted to know, what do these look like? Drawings and texts of the time indicate that they often pulled up along the bankside. So here we go, just kind of pulling up along the bankside, letting people on and off. Other descriptions and some photos show structures built for the steamboats to dock to. Here's some stereographic photos from the late 1800s. Part of the 2021 investigations in Maine were to determine if these landings have an archaeological signature. Could there be archaeological deposits related to people or goods being transported to and from the landing sites? The Sunday Cove landing provided service to the fishing camps at Middle Dam and Lower Richardson Lake, later the home of Louise Richardson or Dickerson Rich. And so the landing, here's Sunday Cove. Here's the landing area, and here's the carry road that would take you down to Middle Dam. Accounts indicate at the time of the steamboat's arrival, the time of the steamboat's arrival was well known, with some variability, providing equal opportunity for people to arrive early and wait long enough to unintentionally or intentionally deposit artifacts. Historical texts and images indicate the landing was along the lakeshore with little to no dock structure. So, oh yeah, here's one of our nice tourism period advertisements to get people to the area. The rates given to and from each place and times. So well published, and I'm sure everyone knew exactly when these steamers were arriving. Again, this is an actual drawing of the Sunday Cove landing, and again, you can see they're basically pulling up bankside. There might be a little structure there. Again, this is located to the northeast side of the lake. And this is what we found. So we did find that that at some point they had put in a dock structure, basic cribbing. Again, the photo was taken from about the location that this was drawn from, so you can see matches up pretty well. This is what it looks like from approach. The large bedrock that probably served as the initial landing before they built the docking. And here's the beginning of the carry road. There's the carry road. It's been well maintained, still used by snowmobilers over the winter. And this is what it looks like when it comes out at the landing. This is the site area. Here's that little remnant dock, and we had quite a few positive shovel tests around there with post-contact material. And we did find kind of a surprising amount of artifacts associated with it, 136, from a variety of different artifact classes. There is a camp nearby. So some of this could be deposits from those people as well, and some of them are clearly later than the period of the use, the historic use. But some very interesting things. Oxen shoe, almost certainly related to the carry road and the ferry landing. Spikes that could be part of structures that were there. Dinnerware, maybe picnicking. This is part of a knife, a cutlery knife. So there definitely was some stuff going on there. So the phenomenon of steamboat travel and transportation in the greater Rangeley Lakes region appears to have lasted less than 100 years, from the mid 1800s to the early 1900s. It was significant to the livelihood of the residents providing such services as delivery of the United States mail, and to the outdoor tourism industry of the late 19th and early 20th century. Based on our investigations, such landing sites may contain data and insights into rural life and recreation and transportation in the mid 19th century, as well as the early 20th. And here is another photo by William Brewster showing one of the steamboats hauled up in Upton. So turning to the last topic I'd like to touch on, recreational tourism. Starting in the mid 1800s, tourism to rural parts of New England began to take off. Lakes and rivers in the Umbagog region were beginning to be known for hunting, fishing, and general outdoor recreation. Tourism to the lakes were marketed to cities and other areas to draw people. Guidebooks such as the one by Charles Farrar were published on a yearly basis from 1876, specific to this lake region. Fascinating, provide lots of detail. Some of it is semi-fictional, but contains lots of nuggets to tell you about the history. So the age of the rusticators began, being people who had appreciation for rustic vacationing lifestyle. Some enjoyed it so much they bought land and built simple cabins or camps, usually designed for occupation in the summer months. And yes, we do see these archaeologically now. Here's someone's wood stove, and the red lines indicate you can, if you're out there on site, you can actually see the bounds of the cabin. Not the same one in the picture, but interesting nonetheless. An interesting rusticator, Harry Dutton, was the son of Benjamin Dutton, who was in turn the co-founder of the Houghton and Dutton Company store in Boston, which was the second department store ever in the country. In 1898, 1899, Harry Dutton built a U-shaped single-story vacation home or camp on Meadowlark Island, like Umbagog. He chose this location as it was more remote than the Rangeley Lake area, which he had been previously vacationing at, and now disliked due to the railroad as it had become too crowded for his liking. The site of the camp we recorded in 2019 with the lakeshore. So the camp itself was built for the modern equivalent of approximately $4 million. The camp was described later by locals as the Dutton Mansion. It was described in more detail by descendants who visited during its operation as having 7 bedrooms, a study, bathroom, living room, dining room, kitchen, pantry, and an ice storage pantry. Each bedroom had a flush toilet and a sink. Concerned about erosion, this is an interesting photo someone captured of it actually being built. Concerned about erosion, Dutton had a seawall built around the edge of the island, including formal boat slips. The camp included at least 3 outbuildings, the tower stylized as a lighthouse, which held a water tank. That's the ice house that they had. And this is the guides camp, which were for the servants to live in, which included a living room, 4 bedrooms, a bathroom, an electrical generator room, and a pump room for the island's water supply. With the construction of the seawall, formal boat slips and bathing stairs were added. And because everyone loves golf at that time period, a golf course was constructed, not on the island, but on the main side of Tyler's Cove. The Duttons sold the island and the camp in the 1940s when it was thought that the reservoir level would be raised to a level that would drown the island. Interestingly, a piece of the camp was dismantled, and pieces of it sold off. The living room still existing as part of a house in Upton Village. So this is what the site looks like today. When we went out there, all the foundations are still very visible. It is privately owned today, and someone has brought a little trailer out there. So this is what the foundations look like. This is the main camp building itself. This is it from behind. The new owners have put a nice little gazebo on the base of the lighthouse structure. This is kind of the main area of the living room. There's the lighthouse again. There's the guides cabin, and this is the area of the ice house itself. One of the boat slips and the stairs for the bathing. While the Dutton camp structures are now in ruins, it has been relatively untouched since its abandonment, as only a pedestrian survey has been performed. It's not clear if intact site deposits exist. Further testing, of course, would be needed. Evaluating the site as a resource. First, it is connected to well-known historical family, giving it that edge. Second, intact foundations could indicate other intact archaeological deposits. Meadowlark Island is also associated with Native American historical occupation and activities. Historical accounts indicate it may have been used as a Native American burial place, and then accounts during the construction of the camp say that a wagon load of animal bones or Native American artifacts were removed from the site during its construction. Overall, a very unique piece of rusticator history, now part of local history and stories of the lake. A quick bonus, here's a nice example of stone wall construction of the period. Here's a nice formal stone wall in the woods. You follow it out, it becomes a little less formal, just a little more like piling. And then it gets out to where it is literally just piles, and you can actually see these are the wagon loads being brought in and piled up. And that's on a night that even shows up nicely on the LiDAR. So thank you very much. That is Lake Umbagog.